Okay, so let's go over the numbers on this flip. This is the most important part of any flip. So the first thing I'm going to show you is our analysis. So this is a document that I use every single time that I run numbers on a flip. So initially when we bought the house, we paid $40,000 even on it. And we had 750 square feet. It was 2 beds, 1 bath. It was built in 1888. It had a basement that wasn't finished. So we were able to finish that basement, bring it up to 1,175 square feet. We put all 3 bedrooms in the basement and we did a full bath downstairs and a half a bath upstairs. So that's sort of what the property looked like. So like I said, purchased $40,500. We ended up putting 10% down. Our initial rehab budget over here on column G, row 4, was $62,000. We blew that budget by quite a bit, and I'll kind of walk you through that now. So we ended up putting $69,161 into the rehab, which made our total loan amount, once we considered purchase price and renovation minus the down payment, was $98,694. Our monthly interest rate turned out to be 0.83% per month, which was around $822 per month. It actually was less than that in month 1 because they only charge you for how much money they've given you. So when you've closed, they only cover the purchase price. So they put $40,000 down on the property. Once we made progress on the renovation, we requested more money, and then we paid money on that additional draw. So however much money you actually took from the bank, or from the lender rather, is how much they charge you in interest. So that was the highest point of interest for us would be $822. The first month it was like 5 something. So hopefully that makes sense. We paid for a builder's risk policy in the beginning, which was a 6-month policy. It cost $450, and it's not prorated at all. You pay for that up front, and you don't get any of that money back. Taxes on the property, we assumed that we'd hold it for 6 months. All of these numbers are assumed that we're going to hold it for 6 months. I always kind of do that when I'm looking at a flip. That's hopefully a worst case scenario, but it helps you get a good idea of your numbers. So once we considered, basically, you want to do 5 months of interest expenses on an initial side, because like I said, you're going to assume that you're going to hold it for 6 months, but you're not going to pay an interest payment the first month. We only have in here 3 months of interest payments because we got the renovation done so quickly, and we should close before we have to make that 4th payment. We paid 2.5 points up front, so the cost of those points for this loan was $2,467. Closing costs were right around $1,500. So when you consider everything that you have to bring to closing, which is all the closing costs, the cost of points, the builder's risk policy, and then the taxes, depending on the state, you might pay them in arrears or you might prepay them. Make sure you know what you're looking at when you're running your numbers, because you'll have to pay those on one side or the other. So total cash to close was $15,983.47. We listed the property for $154,900. So that's our ambitious number. Assuming it closes at $145,000 and we're paying 6% commissions to our agents, that's $8,700 on the low side, $9,300 on the high side if we sell it for that higher price. So our gross would be somewhere between $136,000 and $145,000. Then we consider those interest payments, which, like I said, we only considered, in this case, we just considered 2. We may add another one on there depending on how long we hold it. We don't yet have an offer on it. We took this cash to close figure from C24, $15,983, and subtracted that from our gross. And then this is what we owe back to the lender, $98,694. So it leaves us with a net profit somewhere between $19,976 and $29,454. There's a little bit of wiggle room in there, a little bit of a buffer, because we don't know if the buyer is going to ask us for a home warranty or ask us for any sort of concessions in the end. So that's a total return on investment somewhere between 124% and 184%, which is amazing considering that we're going to make close to $20,000, maybe even $30,000, but we only put $15,000 down. So that's pretty awesome. So I'm going to go through the budget with you. So we had our budget initially, and then I want to show you kind of how that changed as we went through the renovation. It's always going to change, but just remember, when something increases, you need to figure out a way to decrease it somewhere else. Usually easier said than done, but just make an effort to do that. We assumed it was going to be about $700 for plans and permits. In our city here in Leavenworth, Kansas, we had to pay for a renovation permit, and we had to pay for a dumpster permit, and it included $660 in fees. We also had permits for plumbing and electrical, but our plumbers and electricals took care. Our plumbers and our electricians took care of that in the bid and during their work. So we didn't consider that in this part. It's actually in the plumbing, electrical, and bathroom numbers. So we anticipated $1,000 in dumpster. We'd have to rent it and then have them haul it off and dump it. But we actually ended up paying closer to $700. I thought demolition was only going to be about $800. When we got the house, it included all the person's personal belongings. The entire house was filled with furniture and personal belongings. So we had to get all of that out. We hired 1-800-GOT-JUNK to do it. It was $1,500 just to get their stuff out of there. So our actual demolition cost was $2,500. Drywall, we anticipated $10,000, which would have been right, except they had to do some additional framing. So that ended up coming closer to $12,000. We did rubber vinyl, or we did rubber trim, and we were right on that because we just needed basically a total number of linear feet. So it was pretty easy to estimate. Windows and exterior doors, super easy to estimate because we did not replace them. We just switched out some of the hardware, so $200 on that. Interior doors, we anticipated $800. We had 8 doors to replace, which normally are about $100 a piece, but because of COVID, the price of lumber has gone way up. So we ended up paying $1,100 for all the interior doors. We initially got a quote for exterior paint at $2,800. We had to glaze some of the windows on the outside, so we were at $2,950 on that, so $150 over. We thought bathroom finishes would be $4,000. They ended up coming in at $6,416, so we went way over budget on that. We anticipated plumbing to be around $6,000, and we did get an estimate on that. However, we had some issues with the water coming in, and we had to get a backhoe out on the property, so that number went up to $7,200. HVAC, so as you can see, we started going over budget, so we had to get a little creative. We weren't going to do HVAC. We couldn't really, the house really couldn't accommodate ductwork, and we really didn't need to do it. That would have been over $10,000. So we ended up using these wall units that totaled $1,300 with the sleeves. So that was a pretty awesome solution. They work really well. They heat and cool the house. They're pretty great. We planned for $900 in insulation. I completely forgot to consider that we had to insulate the roof of the house. So we ended up being at $1,200, and that was just a stupid mistake. Interior paint, we estimated $3,000. We actually came in at $2,500. Flooring, we anticipated $3,000, but we ended up paying more like $4,153 because we had to pay someone to do the carpet. Initially, we were gonna do it ourselves, but we kind of ran out of time, and everyone was really backed up, so we had to like choose the only guy that was available to do it quickly. So we paid a little more for that just to get it done. We anticipated $2,000 in the kitchen. We actually spent $2,500. Electrical, we got a bid for $8,000. It ended up going up to $8,587, and that was largely, the increase was because the plumbers actually put the water heater in the wrong place, and the inspector came out and said it wasn't going to fly, so they had to move it, which meant we had to bring the electricians back out and they had to rewire it. So that was the increase there. We estimated $1,600 for kitchen appliances. We came in right at that, $1,605. Landscaping, we budgeted $400. We only ended up spending $280. We basically just cleaned up the yard and cut the grass. We were going to do a survey because we were going to split the lot, but we decided not to do that because there really isn't a lot of development in the area, and we figured it would take a really long time to sell that lot, and it was going to cost us $1,200 to do the survey, plus it was going to take them 7 to 8 weeks just to get us the survey back. So we decided to forego that because best case scenario, we would have made $10,000 on that, but all that time took away from that profit. And then when we listed the house, we anticipated an extra $5,000 in value for the additional lot. So that's why we chose not to do that. Our final cleaning we thought would be $400. It ended up being $450 because there was a ton of paint on the bathroom finishes, on the toilets, and the tub and stuff. So the cleaner charged us a little more for that. We thought about $7,000 in framing and subfloors, but we ended up paying $8,000. And then one huge expense that we hadn't considered was removing the lath in the upstairs, and we ended up hiring that out and having 1-800-GOT-JUNK come out again. It totaled about $4,400. So our initial budget we thought would be about $56,000 with a 10% contingency built in, so it was $61,870. We actually ended up spending $69,161. This is one of the only times I've ever gone over budget, because, and the reason I was okay with it was because we ended up listing it for higher than we thought. Initially, we thought we were going to list closer to 140, maybe 145. And as we started to progress and realized that we were spending more, we brought the realtor out there who told us we could probably list it closer to 155. So I felt okay by increasing the budget. And then here's our timeline. So we closed, I want to say the 18th of February. So beforehand, we went in there and we did as much as we could. So we took all the measurements of the house, we planned the framing, we divided tasks between me and my partner, and then also between my dad came out and did some work for us, and also all the contractors that we hired. So we figured out who was going to do what, and then we had to find somebody to get everything out of the house. Like I told you, we used 1-800-GOT-JUNK. So we were able to do all that beforehand. So the morning of closing, they were already in there. We closed on the house, we got them in there, and they cleaned it out, so we were able to start work on day one. So before closing, you want to make sure that you send all your earnest money deposit, and then you get everything going with the lender. They're going to need your contract and really whatever else they ask you for. So do that ahead of time. We scheduled the exterior paint. Initially, we thought we were going to do the roof, but we didn't have to. So that was nice to find out. We scheduled plumbing and electrical even before we closed because we knew that was going to be the first thing. We scheduled the dumpster to be dropped off on the day of closing and the porta potty as well. We drafted up all the contracts between me and my partner. We made sure we knew how all the funding was going to go and we were going to handle all the money. And then we set up our builder's risk policy. All of that happened before closing. So we knew that we could hit the ground running. So as soon as we closed, like I said, we got in there to do demo and clear out. We changed the locks right away. Then we started working on subfloors and framing. And while all that was happening, we had the painter outside so that everyone knew that we were working on the house and it was going to be coming soon. And that way, as soon as we listed it, we'd have some traction right from the start. We initially began to start the process to divide the lot, and we ended up not choosing to do that, but you want to do that right, as soon as you get in there, because it's typically a time-consuming process, and especially if it's a new market and you have to learn about zoning and everything from the city, it just can be a learning curve. So make sure you start that right away, potentially even before closing. So the second week after we finished all the framing and the subfloor repair, we did rough and electrical and rough and plumbing. We came up with a plan for heating and air, and we started working on the insulation. After that, it's 3 weeks were spent on installing the drywall. It's a very time-consuming process. They have to lay every single piece, cut it all out, and then they have to plaster it, and then they have to texture it, and all the while everything has to dry, between steps. So it does take a while. Then in week 6, once all that was done, we started painting. That only took about 4 days. While they were painting, we were able to install the kitchen floor. And at the same time, our electricians and our plumbers were doing their final inspections, their final finishes, and then also inspections. Once all that was done, we did the flooring. After that, we were able to clean the property, get our listing photos, and get it on the MLS on day 47. So that's it in a nutshell, the entire flip, and I will let you know what we sell it for. Thanks, guys.